One of the people who follow my channel wanted me to do a video focusing on how to play and set up a warrior. I'm going to give you what I do, but there's a lot of different ways to play the warrior class, and I am not an expert in the warrior class. So if you see me doing something that's wrong, feel free to comment. I'm always looking to improve my skills. What I do certainly works more or less well enough in the group game. I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of a 115 warrior, a level 115 warrior, but most of what I say is applicable all the way down to level 85. For instance, Courageous Defense is one of the key defensive abilities a warrior has. And if you go to your combat skills and you look at Courageous Defense, 115 is timer -1. You go ahead and order them by timer, and you will see level 85 Bracing Defense is the equivalent ability. I have almost max AAs, not quite on this warrior. He's a little under a year old, and I have not done like the anniversary stuff on him yet. So I'm still developing him. Some of his AUGs aren't quite where I want them to be. He's still got a couple of AC 45 AUGs for type 7s. He definitely needs to improve his type 5 AUGs. His gear is a mix of I would say TBL ranging from COV with some tier 1 raid drops. So it's mostly group, but it's some raid stuff. And so let me start talking. First, when you play a warrior, you have 3 basic weapon stances. You have your shield stance, which is your sword and board. That's going to give you your most defense, and it'll be your lowest DPS, though still quite significant. Your next stance is dual wielding. With the right weapons, dual wielding does tremendous damage. It's incredible as for aggro. You can pull aggro off of a lot of people, including SKs who are well geared and well AA'd. You don't take as much damage as you would if you went to two-handed. And so it's kind of the stance that I would recommend you use in the group game when you're going over content that you're completely comfortable with. Just switching to shield when you need that extra oomph, maybe on a name pull. Two-handed could be your DPS stance. That really depends on your weapon and what you have, so we activate that. I have the Velium Threaded Great Axe with the Frozen Grommet, so it does a good significant amount of damage. But generally, if I'm tanking, I'm going to be in dual wield, unless I need to go to shield. And I have the Velium Threaded Broadsword and Killa's Warblade, which drops in the Zlandikar mission. Both of these are warrior-only weapons with Spike of Anger. So they proc a lot of anger. They're great for holding aggro, getting it and keeping it. You're going to get comfortable to find, if you can dual wield and you're not putting your healer, overstressing your healers, then that's the way to go. If your healers are being pushed and they're constantly healing, go ahead and switch to shield, because your DPS usually is not, you can afford to let your DPS go. If you're not the main tank, you're not, your role in the group is just DPS, then if you have the right weapon, go with two-handed and you'll do some great damage. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hotbars set up here that I use, and then also some extraneous combat abilities up here. So the first 3 hotbars for me are the most important. Obviously melee attack, Warlord's Grasp is an aggro ability, but it's also that one where it's not quite as cool as the Shadow Knight hate pull that can do it from quite a distance. This is only from, I think, 45 feet. Yeah, from 45 feet away. But, you know, if a mob's coming in, they get close, you hit it, pull it in, gives you a little extra aggro. Shield is a warrior-only ability. I've got healer here. You type in the name of your healer. Or if you're doing a lot of crowd control, perhaps your crowd control, perhaps your puller, and you can hit that whenever you are worried about that individual who you've designated taking damage. This will shift 50% of the damage that he takes to you. And it could be significant because the damage is going to be the damage that he would have taken. But it's a little life-saving tool. It's not quite as cool as Lay on Hands that Paladins have, but Shield is something that if you use it right, it's worth having. And then I've set up, this is a mash key. I don't social hotkey all of my abilities. I try and keep them separate, but there are certain abilities that I do. I put on a hotkey, and you can decide how you want to do it. Knee Strike, Gut Punch, Shield Splinter, which procs your synergy, Call of Challenge, and the Disc Throat Jab. So I hit this every 10 to 15 seconds. You know, you can wait every 30 seconds, but no, 10 to 15 seconds, you're just going to hit that every now and then. That's your mash key, and it's got a lot of little abilities put into it. You can, again, you can break those up, do it however you want. I just want to hit one key with that, and if they don't go off, it's, other than Shield Splinter, it's not huge. Then I have, this is every 10 minutes, Commanding Voice, Disc Commanding Voice, Disc Paragon Champion, and I have a timer. So I want to hit that every 10 minutes to keep those up. And then I have an 18, Mash 18, that does Brace for Impact, which is a 20-minute buff, and Blade Guardian, which is an 18-minute buff. And it also uses my Charm so that I can do Geomantra 23. And so I'll hit that every 18 seconds. Those will pop up. You know, for instance, Blade Guardian gives you a chance to parry incoming attacks if your health drops below 40%. So you've got your Mash 10, puts up Paragon Champion, Commanding Voice. Then there's Taunt. The old school always told you, don't use Taunt unless you've lost aggro, and there's nothing wrong with sticking with that. The only reason that you might want to change that, if you're a modern tank with your AAs, is with the right AAs, your Taunt can be used every 2 seconds. So you're pretty much never, you know, Taunt isn't a problem. You can use Taunt as often as you could cast a spell, more often. More importantly, if you have Sneering Grin, which is an AA, every time you use Taunt, it procs 15,000 aggro points. So just hit Taunt as often as you want, in my opinion. This might be controversial. Certainly in the old days, this is not what we were taught, because Taunt did not have the AA Sneering Grin at that time. And it was like every 6 seconds you could use it or something like that. And it was only useful if you didn't have aggro, because it would pull aggro back to you. You'd get the top aggro. The next thing I have here is Confluent Expanse, RK2. I like to keep that up. It's every 4 minutes that you need to cast that. And what it does is when somebody casts a direct heal on you, you essentially proc hate on all of the enemies around you. They're expansive. Inspires 3,388 raw hate on all enemy targets around you. So this is an AE ability. And remember, as warriors, one of the areas that Shadow Knights are going to challenge you is your ability to do AE aggro, snap AE aggro. So that's your first line of defense, is you have that up, and every time somebody heals you, you're building aggro on everybody around you. We have other area of effect abilities, and I'll go over those later. Imperator's Command is useful for helping your group fight harder. It says basically it increases the chance to trigger magical effects, melee combat skills are increased, maximum health is increased, etc. And it lasts for 1 minute, and it's refreshing every 3 minutes. So this one you can either just pop it every time it's up because you're pulling mobs and it just means that you'll do better. But the one thing is, if you know you're about to pull a named or you're going to do a tough pull or something, you can hold off on that to make sure it's up, and then when you pull that name, you hit it. Battle Leap, you need to do once each time you're in a zone, and then it gives you some benefits. I have to be attacking a mob to use that. Champion's Aura is your aura, you got that up. And then Howl of Warlord is your escape key. Basically, you hit that and kind of boogie away from the mobs if for some reason you're soloing or something, you just want to get away. It does not turn you invisible anymore, of course. It gives you an evader's protection for a brief period of time. Okay, the second hotkey, and okay, Shadow Knights do not keep a defensive disc up at all times. They have a number of defensive discs, and they use them on an as-needed basis because they will not stay up all the time. That's one of the differences between a warrior and a Shadow Knight, is ever since we got the level 85 bracing defense, that is a defense that you can keep up all of the time. And let's go ahead and look at Courageous Defense. Increases your AC by 7734. It does not increase your AC by 7734. It increases, in my case, my AC by, let's look, 9405, 8729. So, 700 or so. But it's still, it bumps up my AC. So say I'm going into shield mode, and then I put on Courageous Defense, and that puts me at just under 10,000 AC on this particular tank. So that's your bread and butter defensive ability. And as a warrior, you're always going to have a defensive disc up. And the reason is you can, and two, you don't want to stress your healers. If your healers aren't having to heal you all the time, they can do some DPS or other things. Every class has many things that they can do, and your job as a tank is to increase their ability to do other things other than healing. So you have Courageous Defense up all the time. But you also have, okay, then I have Flash of Anger and Fortitude Discipline. Flash of Anger is a disc that will protect you. You have to be using the shield when you do that. And then basically for 6 seconds, I believe, let's check. For 6 seconds, you parry all incoming attacks. So this is something you would use on a pull, like the names coming in, you hit that pull so you can give everybody a chance to get their heals going off. Or if you're suddenly really low health, you can hit that. Fortitude Discipline is very similar to Flash of Anger, but it gives you a longer stretch. That's 12 seconds, plus most modern tank shields give you 6 seconds extra of Fortitude. And it increases your ability to evade attacks dramatically. So between Flash and Anger and Fortitude in Fortitude, I think you can only use every 40 minutes, and Flash of Anger, I believe, is good every 5 minutes. So I tend to go with Flash of Anger first because that's going to pop quicker. Then this is my secondary. These are get out of jail cards, heals, help you, save your life. Dragoncliff over here is also a very good, strong, suddenly you pulled 12 mobs, and if you go down, the entire party goes down, so you hit Dragoncliff, spending 45 AAs, and probably Flash of Anger, and you go to Ultimate Stand, and you are now a rock, a stone wall. You will live, and you pull all the aggro on you, hitting all of your area of effect aggros, and hopefully then if you have crowd control or whatever it is, you can overcome that bad pull. So the first thing, Courageous Defense, that's just what I use, bread and butter, that's up all the time. But you also have Ultimate Stand, which pops every 10 minutes, and it's good for 3 minutes. So 30% of the time you can be Ultimate Stand. Warrior's Rampart pops, let's call it every 10 minutes, and it lasts for 4 minutes. And then Armor of Relentless Runes lasts for 1 minute and pops, we'll call it every 10 minutes. But basically what it is 8 minutes out of 10, you could be using something slightly bigger than Courageous Defense. You would use Ultimate Stand, these armors mainly like on a named pull, or when you're pulling multiple mobs and having to tank them and stand up, because you can be up there all the time. And then finally you have Roaring Shield, which is absorbs 40% of incoming melee damage that exceeds 12,000 for up to 1,000,000 points, and it pops every 10 minutes. So these 4 are not Roaring Shield. Roaring Shield is like, call it a rune, but so it can be combined with Courageous Defense. But these 3 are in lieu of Courageous Defense, and each does their own special ability, which gives you more chance to defend. Finally, if Ultimate Stand isn't enough and you pop Roaring Shield, another thing you have is Finish the Fight. Finish the Fight is a great disc. And, I think the first level is Pain. No Time to Bleed, Pain Doesn't Hurt. Those are earlier levels. You can look those up. But we go to Finish the Fight. And your skin absorbs roughly 6,000 hit points of each melee strike for 3 minutes and fades after 2.6 million. So this is going to lessen the damage that you're taking. You also have Composite Shield, another ability, and then Warlord's Bravery is a lesser ability. It can be used every 20 minutes. It reduces incoming melee damage by 15% for 75 hits. Armor of Experience, every 20 hours you can use that. These are damage reducers. Basically, each of these, especially Finish the Fight and Composite Shield and Roaring Shield, should be used liberally and often because they're popping pretty quickly. Then you get to Warlord's Bravery, Armor of Experience. You're going to use those a little bit less often because, for instance, Armor of Experience pops every 20 hours. Warlord's Bravery is every 20 minutes. This is your defensive line. Then, as I said, Dragonglyph is an ultimate savior. If you're tanking on a raid mob that you guys are, this is a tough raid mob, you might use that. If you're doing a group pull and it goes bad, you might hit that because you don't want to die. Maybe you're doing Icebound Avatar and, this is new to you and you're not as geared up as you'd like to be. This can add to it, but you don't want to use it too often unless you're max AA. Okay, the third line is my Aggro Line. And you're just going to have to get a sense of when you want to use these abilities. Use them often. Whether you need to use all of them or hit them, how often you have to hit them, you have a sense. It depends on kind of like how much aggro your DPS draws, the people you're grouping with. But I've got, the line of Warlord's Fury, Craig's Roar. I tend to put them in line of when I'm going to pop them. So pop first, second, third, Pressing Shout, Aggravate, Roar of Challenge, Phantom Aggressor. When I get down here, they're going to come up a little less often. Ageless Enemy, Blast of Anger. And then these 4 are special because these are area of effect aggro abilities, or ineffectively aggro. The 2 area taunt and wade into battle are no damage area of effect aggro abilities. You're going to use those in particular if you're mezzing mobs, if you've got a chanter, if you don't want to do damage to the mobs. You also have Tempest Blades and Rampage, which do damage to all the mobs in a certain area. So these 4 are area of effect aggro abilities. We also have Unending Attention and Biting Tongue Discipline up here, just because I ran out of room, that you can use occasionally, extra aggro if you need it. As a warrior, you probably are just not going to have a problem holding aggro, especially if you can equip yourself with anger weapons that proc anger. So we've got the mash buttons, things that I want to keep up all the time. We've got our defensive abilities that I'm always going to keep up at least a discipline if I'm fighting. And then the line of aggro. Then this 4th line is my DPS line, where I want to do DPS. Now, ideally, if I'm doing DPS, you can use this even if you're tanking, but you want to go to your 2-handed, for instance, if you're going to be doing DPS, or at least dual wield. Unless you're pulling a named and you just want to. So Spire of Warlord helps DPS for the whole group. You all know what that is. You can look that up. Vehement Rage, Intensity of the Resolute, and then I've got, let's see, actually. So I usually hit Mighty Strike first, and then Brutal Onslaught. And when that fades, go to Fell Strike, Precision Strike. Warlord Shoals Hero Blade, you pop that. Usually I pop that before Fell Strike and before Precision. I don't know what. Strike Through is another one. Determined Prizal isn't something you need to use too often. By focusing your wheel, you can use an opponent's attack to strengthen your own, so it's just a little extra DPS. Rage of Ralos. This is going to cause your weapon's magical effects to proc. It's not just necessarily DPS. For instance, if I'm dual wielding and I hit that, my Spike of Anger is going to go off the charts. Weapon Covenant is this is the AA ability, and Weapon Covenant is the disc ability. Same thing, causes my weapons to proc more often. Now, if I'm using a weapon that has a DPS proc, then it's going to do more DPS. If I have a weapon that procs something that causes anger, hatred, then that's going to happen. For my 5th line, these are things that help me hold the line, will heal me. Resplendent Glory basically increase the effectiveness of incoming healing spells. Warlord's Resurgence gives me an extra 40,000 health. I can use that every 10 minutes. Tenacity is an extra 55,000 health and increases your maximum health for a minute and 6 seconds. This is something that you might hit, for instance, on a named pull. Inner Rejuvenation, I forget what that is. Oh, it's useless. It's a little 29,000 point heal that you use when you're out of combat. The only time you would use that is if you're like soloing or something. Staunch Recovery, of course, is the A. You know what that is. That's if you're out of endurance or something. Mark of the Mage Hunter, Shield Reflect. These are little buffs that you can use when appropriate. It's probably most useful like on things with AE damage. Shield Reflect. These are so Infusion of the Faithful, kind of useless. War Cry. Very rarely is this going to be of use in the modern area, but if you are going against a mob that silences, then you may want to, for instance, use War Cry to help give your party a chance to avoid the silence. There are definitely some raid mobs and group mobs that silence these days. Grappling Strike and Press the Attack are used to position your mobs. One press pushes the mob a little bit. Grappling Strike moves them forward a little bit. And then Projection of Fury is equivalent to Phantom Aggressor. Generally, I might use that just to, if two mobs are coming in, maybe you can throw one at it. There's a little off-tank mob for just a few seconds while you get control. And it adds additional hatred, so you can use that occasionally. And then finally, this is just my utility line. Furious Leap causes you to leap forward. Icebound Ulthark is a familiar that you get. It's an upgrade to the one you get when you finish the ROS stuff. And, you know, we've got our Cloak, which should give you damage shield, shrink ring, Steadfast Servant, but Chaotic Gesture is interesting. A lot of people don't use that anymore, but one of its abilities is every 30 to 60 seconds, it might cast a complete heal, basically a 500,000 point heal. And so on certain group things, when you're really getting tough, sometimes it's random, but you know, why not throw it out there? Gives you a little chance of an unexpected heal. Kick. I have it auto-activated. You're going to want to auto-activate Kick or Bash. And then I have a few Throne of Heroes, Campfire, and Origin, you know, my teleport type things. Then finally, Endurance. This, you could do Breather, but this is basically something I used, like if you're in the middle of combat, you hit attack off, you hit Howl of the Warlord. Don't do this if you're the main tank. And then it hits Disc Breather if you need additional endurance. I use Breather over some of the other abilities because it doesn't slow you. And you could just use this, I think, whenever you need to. I don't know if you have to be out of combat, but this is the way I was taught to do it. That's, you know, the basics of how I set up and play a tank. Let's see. Visible. Head away from here. The nice thing about a warrior is, unlike a lot of the classes around here, you can actually, if you want to, you don't even have to always push the buttons. So we come in here, Warrior's Grasp, I'm on there, I hit my mash button, mash 10 timer in case it's not done, Taunt, and I haven't put up anything, so let's go do some DPS. Let's say I want to do DPS, and I also want to defend myself because maybe I'm taking a lot of damage. There's no reason you can't use Finish the Fight, Composite Shield, Roaring Shield in addition. Of course, here, you know, I've got sufficient AC and hit points that certainly soloing isn't a problem. Warriors do a surprising amount of damage. And with Breather, they're pretty much never going to be out of endurance. I'm not telling you where to spend your AAs. Obviously, the first thing you're going to focus on as a warrior is your defensive AAs, getting your combat agility, combat stability done. Just start filling it in with the auto grant now. You're going to have 20,000 AAs right off the bat. And warriors just don't have that many A's. So at I'm almost finished at 36,000. My SK has 57,000 AAs. This is how I set up and play a warrior. It's okay. There's a lot of ways to do it. Go to EQ freelance raids, and in the forums there, you're going to find raid proficiency. You look at warriors, and it's going to give you some ideas of how to set up a hotkey. Some warriors use a lot of socials, and they combine a lot of these buttons, so they're not having to think about them and hit them all. I use socials for my mash keys, things that I just have to redo all the time. But other than that, I like to keep my defense abilities, my aggro abilities separate, and I just press these buttons whenever I feel a need to it. If you go to the EverQuest forums, you know, people will give advice. It's a very nice class, and the cool thing is, like I said, I can just pull a mob, pull back here, hit courageous defense, hit melee attack, and then lean back in my chair and just sit there and still do, you know, 160, 200,000 point DPS. That's all I have to say about a warrior, but feel free to ask questions and I'll try and get you helpful answers. Or if you see something you're like, Mark, this is not the way to do it, aka 12 strings, Mark. And I will look at it and research it and decide if there's a better way. This is just set up. I don't have a lot of, with my shaman, almost everything is turned into keyboard commands. So I can hit, you know, I use my number pad, I use the numbers across the top of the keyboard, and I heal that way, I cast cures that way, I do DPS that way. Everything's on the keyboard. On my warrior, I don't do too much other than the one key to start my melee attack. I tend to just hunt and peck with the mouse, you know, and basically it's look at this line. If I got everything pressed down, if I got courageous up, do I need extra healing, extra defense? And then do I need more aggro? Boom, hit these buttons. And then, you know, am I going to use DPS? Then in that case, think about this DPS line. That is it on the warrior. It's a nice class. It's a lot less work than playing a Shadow Knight. I know people love Shadow Knights, but I will tell you this: once you get used to playing a warrior, their ability to tank is just insane. The other thing they have is their DPS is, there's nothing to sniff about at it. They can go toe-to-toe with a Shadow Knight when it comes to DPS. You used to think Shadow Knights did more DPS, but whatever they've done to warriors these days, their DPS is really good. Let's see. They can tank the DPS. The only thing is, you know, they can't self-heal. So if you let the healer go down, you may well go down after that. Whereas a Shadow Knight can sometimes recover just because of their ability to tap up, etc. I really like the warrior class. I have gone with the Shadow Knight. It's very good in the group game, especially if you're going to be pulling with it. You know, you've got your ability to FD, etc. So Shadow Knight is a sweet all-around class that can do just about everything. The warrior is very focused, but my gosh, they can tank. And that's all I have to say. I'll talk to you guys later.